John Lennon was one of the most important and seminal musicians the world has ever seen. As 1/4 of the Beatles, his creativity and talent have influenced generations of people the world over, and continue to do so. Despite being Liverpool born and bred, it was New York that he made his home in the last years of his life. And it was on the streets of this great city that he met his end, gunned down by deranged fan Mark Chapman outside his apartment block. Strawberry Fields serves as a permanent, peaceful tribute to the man they called the head Beatle. Thousands of people visit here every year just to pay tribute to the man, his words and his music, and to wonder what could have been. John Lennon had just released his first new material in 5 years when he met his untimely end.
John Lennon once said that he wished he had been born in New York, that it was a toy box of the world. Such was his love for the city. So will his ghost linger amongst the skyscrapers, the parks, the hotels and restaurants of this beautiful city? A place that for John was home. Our investigation was to be centered on the streets of New York, a city rich in connections to the former Beatle. Lennon had walked so many of the streets, stayed in so many of the hotels, and performed in so many of the venues and TV studios. If we were to find his spirit anywhere, surely it would be in this mythic and legendary city. Around the corner from the apartment block where Lennon lived was one of his favourite haunts, Café La Fortuna. He described it as a refuge, a haven, a grassroots contact with an unpretentious cafe. And it was here that I wanted to begin my investigation. I had arranged to meet Vincent Irwind, more affectionately known as Uncle Vinny, the owner of the cafe in Lennon's day, and a good friend to the singer. We sat at the exact table that Lennon used to sit at on his numerous visits to the cafe. So how often did John used to come here?
Well, he started coming here the second week we were open, which was in June 1976. He was in here, except if he was out of town. If he was out of town, it's a different story. But if he was in New York, he was in here at least 2 or 3 times a week, and sometimes as much as 4 times.
And what kind of a person was John Lennon?
He was a gentleman. He was had a good sense of humor, terrific sense of humor, and very intelligent, very smart.
And do you remember what you were doing when you heard that he'd been shot?
We were home that evening. My wife was packing. She had to leave to go to Italy. And the thing came in over the TV that he was shot. I only wish I could have been there when this guy was ready to pull the trigger on him over there and knock the gun out of his hand or something. But listen, the whole thing was what I would call a great tragedy, a real tragedy.
Do you think his spirit is still around?
Oh, I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it. It's in this place, I'll tell you that.
Pray that Ireland will be free. Pray that Ireland will be free.
Chris had ventured further afield and out of the skyscrapers of Manhattan to the tenement buildings of the Bronx.
When hands hold up a glass to unite people.
He was meeting with Tom Doyle, a former bassist and guitarist with the Plastic Ono band.
From the dreaded rifle's blast.
Tom appeared with John Lennon on the David Frost Show and played with him for 2 years.
The dreams of our ancestors fulfilled. Then Ireland will be free. Pray that Ireland will be free.
Tom, how did you meet John Lennon?
We were fans of the Beatles, but we were also musicians. And then I get the call, and strangely enough, it was at my friend Billy Manelli's house. And we get the call, and David Peel says, "Yup, I just signed with Apple Records. Can you guys be down at Record Plant?" To which, of course, we said, yes.
Yeah.
So that's the start.
What were your first impressions of John when you met him?
Sharp as a tack. Total gentleman and rock and roller. You know, he was, all I can say in one sentence, he was one of the boys. In other words, he didn't make us feel inferior. Like here he is, a multimillionaire superstar of the world, and he just hung out with us, just as we're talking now.
So he was down to earth.
Totally. Totally,
Yeah.
totally.
How did New York inspire John?
Freedom.
Freedom?
Because just like he could hang out with us and he wasn't paranoid, and, you know, nobody was rushing, the one thing he said later on when I saw him again in '77 was that basically in New York, when he was living on Bank Street in the Village, he could ride around on a bike and people would say, "Hello, John, hello." That was it. He wasn't hustled, and he had a great time there.
Where were you when you first heard that John was shot?
That night I come home totally exhausted, doing my studying, and all of a sudden I get a phone call from one of my ex-wife's girlfriends, and she said, "John has been shot." And remember what I just told you? I had just written a letter to him that morning. So at that point, it was like, oh my God. John was the focal point of our lives, and when he died, the world was at a loss. He did become a martyr.
Do you still feel John's presence at all?
Every day. There's no way we would have survived for 30 years without his spirit guiding us. Yes, we have photographs with John all around us when we take them at Strawberry Fields. We go to Strawberry Fields every year for his birth and for his death.
If he's still here, still around, okay, where would we find him in New York?
Within every musician that sings a Beatles song.
I was encouraged by the recollections we had heard. Lennon loved New York, and New York loved Lennon. Light had deserted the streets of Manhattan, leaving behind a world of neon lights and smoke emanating from sidewalk vents. I wanted to start our search with that night in December 1980, the night of Lennon's death. We headed uptown towards Central Park and the apartment block where Lennon was fatally wounded. Built in the 1880s, the Dakota building stands on the corner of 72nd Street and Central Park. Roman Polanski shot much of the macabre film Rosemary's Baby in the Dakota, and it's always attracted the high society of New York. But it's best known as the home of John Lennon in the late 1970s, and more morbidly, the site of his murder.
Now this is it, this is the Dakota building. This is where John and Yoko had an apartment, and this is the place where John was murdered on the 8th of December 1980 at 10 to 11 at night. Mark Chapman, who was a crazed fan and a stalker and a publicity seeker, was waiting for him in the shadows, shoots John 4 times. He didn't even flinch, nothing. When they turned up to get him, he was apparently just standing calmly, just watching. Do you want to go and have a wee look?
All right, yeah, let's go look. Let's go look.
This is it. What happened was, Mark Chapman was apparently sitting here,
Okay.
reading Catcher in the Rye, and then when John came, he stood up, got into like a combat stance, shot him. 2 policemen turned up, took John in the back of their car to drive him to the Roosevelt Hospital, which is just a couple of blocks away, and he died in the car.
Let me see if I can find exactly where he got shot. I am picking up something over here. But he was over there, right? I'm getting this right here.
What are you
Right
picking
here.
up from there?
What I'm picking up is sadness, okay? I'm picking up that there's some type of trauma that occurred right here. Does it mean it was John Lennon? I don't know yet. The next thing I have to do is realize, okay, this is a hot spot for me. All right, John, show me where you fell. Come on, John, show me where you fell. I had a muscle tighten up back here. I'm wondering if he was shot, because he was shot, there was 4 shots, okay? If it was kind of like bang, 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 bang. This could be, was shot right here, was maybe shot right here. Because there's a lot of sadness here, but I'm getting the contractions here and then here again. So we know the guy just stood there.
Yeah.
John looked at him. He looked at the man that shot him. He kept walking in here, and I could feel his path here, going through here, with the contractions that occurred here, and with looking at the guy that shot him, and there was the stare at both of them. And when they locked, John felt a lot of sadness and a lot of like, why? I do have to believe that, hope I'm right, that this is where he got shot.